Live now. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hydra's Den. I'm your host Hydra, and today I'm joined by two co-hosts. We've got Trent.
Hey.
And we have Owlbear.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so for some of you who haven't been listening for a while, Trent has been on with me before. Trent, you want to go through some of your experience with tabletop?
Okay. I've been playing since I was like 11 years old, which is 14 years now, 15 years. I haven't really DM'd any or game mastered anything since high school, but I read a lot of systems and I try to chime in to help people where I can. Getting back into it's the hardest part for me.
Yeah. And Owlbear, if you want to go through your experience.
I'm much more green. I was first introduced to tabletops in high school, in the form of like tabletop strategy, but only actually got to play D&D since maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm pretty new. But I'm also the perpetual cursed DM. So being a player isn't in the stars for me.
Yeah, know that feel. And for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, I've been running games since, I guess, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I've been running one continuous session for that same 6 years, and I've made a game. You can see other sessions of that game I've hosted on this channel, and the YouTube link or on our channel below. It'd probably be somewhere around there. So today we are going to be talking about the inevitability of the Level 1, Session 1 TPK. And how you handle that. So
should we be posting the Twitch link in the announcements thread?
The Twitch link gets posted. It should be already stickied. I can put it up there though right now. Thanks for reminding me. Or you know what, you could put it up. So for those who are wondering what a TPK is, since we're kind of going to new players here, new DM specifically here, with this, a TPK is a total party kill. That's what happens when everybody dies. It's usually not a specific thing that you plan for, but it really sucks. It's actually extremely dangerous, I find, for new DMs and new player groups, because when players get wiped out right at the beginning, it often it'll ruin the game for them. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you just started, you have no idea what you're doing, and you die for what seems like no good reason. It's not something you can completely stop because dumb things will happen. It's a dice-based game. It doesn't matter what type of tabletop we're talking about here. If you're playing with dice, then there's a chance that everyone's just going to die for no good reason. But it's still something that you should try to move against, I feel. I mean, if anyone else has if anyone else here supports the TPK.
I mean, there's ways around the TPK, but when it comes to just the dice being against the players, that kind of gets into fudging the dice for the sake of the game. But I feel like that's a different subject.
Yeah, totally.
On dice fudging.
I think TPKs can be, I don't want to say useful, but if everybody is going into it on agreement that the system's going to be more lethal, or if you're playing a system which in and of itself is designed for high lethality, where character creation is very, very easy and you're not expected to have one for a long time, or even it's the style of the game, if you're playing like a mercenary company and the idea is that you're just playing, random nobodies who get recruited, it could be used a little in that realm, but I'm not saying you should be employing it on purpose, but it can be a good learning experience for what the rest of the campaign's expected to be like.
No, of course. So I'm going to specify here that I'm referring to new DMs, first session, first player, like first group of players, where everything's very fresh going in. If you have a lot more experience with it, if you've been past that first session 1 before, or even the session 0 we talk about in one shots in a few of our other videos, then yeah, it can happen and everyone can shrug it off. But the specific danger here is for people who haven't had the experience of a regular game and the understanding of what sort of threats there are going in. So from here, I want to kind of like walk into like what causes it. And I think I think we can all agree the primary cause is either going to be the players made some bad decisions or the DM made some bad decisions. What I mean by that is if it's the players, it's going to be that the players did something supremely stupid. You put up a warning, there was all the signs, and nope, they decided to jump off that cliff anyways. It's something that's going to happen. That's a hard one to deal with. But if it's a DM one, if it's on you, then that's a little bit more challenging. So my takeaway, I'll go through everyone in a bit, but in a second. But my initial takeaway is that there's a few things I can tell you to make sure that it's not your fault as a DM that all the players died at the beginning. And the first rule, before all else, is do not make your first enemy Tiamat. And if you don't know who Tiamat is a very difficult encounter for late game parties. This is something that will come up where a player starts because they got inspired by reading the books or whatever, or DM starts playing, and they get this amazing idea. They want to put it in because, it's so cool, and it's an extremely big challenge. Nobody's going to survive that, and everyone dies. Whoopsies. It's just not a good idea. I'm to sort of pass it off here if anyone else wants to bring in their opinions on this.
I mean, the example I know best for that, everybody and their mother playing D&D has a story about the Tarrasque. You go on YouTube, you look up D&D videos, and everybody's got a story about how they dealt with a Tarrasque or they encountered one. It's that monster that everybody knows about when they play this game, and it's a monster that everybody likes to see in games. It's a monster everybody thinks is cool. I wouldn't even put up a level 20 party against one, to be honest, and I've seen some people. Yeah, I wouldn't put a level 20 party up against them, and I've seen DMs doing level 1s or level 5 games, making them the final boss, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I feel that's a bit more. If you want to have a Tarrasque, for example, in your first session, I think that is totally within the realm of possibilities in the circumstance that it's being used as an element to display the power or the ability of the big bad evil guy, which is the Tarrasque. So the players know, like, there's the looming threat that you can talk about, but then when you show it, like, destroying the city they're in or the town they're in or what have you, then there's a time and place, but I feel like that's not a good starting tool for beginner DMs that are just getting used to the ropes and how the system works to be using those kinds of more advanced DMing tactics.
Yeah, definitely. And I just realized I should also add, additionally, do not make the first encounter your OC, whatever, your original creation character or creature. It is difficult to balance for something. Like, even now, even at the point I'm at, I still sometimes struggle to balance encounters for players. So as a new DM and running your first time, you will not. I'm sorry, the unfortunate truth is you will not be able to effectively balance an encounter and create a creature from the ground up for this situation. Use creatures that are already there. Read the rules on, like, challenge ratings and things like that. Do not give someone something that has the potential to just beat them down, because the main thing that you're going at with your first encounter is you're trying to teach people the rules. You're trying to teach people what the heck they're doing. So when you're bringing in something you just made up, you're just complicating things needlessly and absurdly. You guys have any experiences with this type of stuff?
I mean, right now I'm still preparing a one shot, and it's almost done, but I was trying for the longest time to think of how I was going to have like zombie gunslingers involved in the game, and I realized the best way to do that was just to take the zombie template and give them a revolver.
Sure.
It doesn't affect much beyond just giving them a ranged weapon, but it doesn't make them actually capable of using it properly, so it doesn't change the difficulty of the enemy that much.
Yeah, but I mean, you specifically have experience, though. I'm to emphasize that. You have experience with running sessions. This isn't your first time.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would stick to templates. Even now I stick to templates in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even now, I find the easiest thing to do is when you know the difficulty of encounter you want to have. Like, you have a party of like 4 or 5 level ones, you're gonna want to be sticking to like kobolds and goblins and rats and other simple mundane creatures in the realm. But if that's not particularly to what you want, like say you're starting an Underdark campaign, everything's infinitesimally stronger in the Underdark, but you don't want the TPK at level 1. So reskinning like half the monster manual can be reskinned into anything else you want. Like, you have goblins, you can reskin them into ratmen. You can reskin them into basic drow like trainee mercenaries. Just because the creature you want to use doesn't exist, you can just swap images but keep stats, keep the stat block.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. That's I did that. I didn't really think of that, but yeah, that's actually a really good way to go about it. If you feel like you need to bring in your original creations, you have your own lore that you want to make or whatever. Stick to stat blocks that already exist and just reskin stuff. It's so much safer, and people are gonna have a better time. I can assure you.
Yeah, somebody's already done the balancing act of making sure that it's right for that level. You're just changing their profile picture and maybe giving them an ability or two,
Hmm.
or an AC change. But even then, that's changing a monster's AC once you're starting the game kind of changes the entire flow of the combat.
Definitely.
Uh, Another good example, if you're playing D&D specifically, keep the challenge rating of the monsters in mind. They're balanced for a party of 4.
Yeah.
Um, if you think it would be cool to have your Goblin Den have 6 goblins and a bugbear, that's turning that from 3 goblins being equivalent to a party of 4 to you now have a CR3 or CR4 encounter, and your party is most likely not going to survive.
Yep.
Yeah.
I made that mistake once.
Yeah,
Um,
the CR system is something that we should definitely go into deeply in a different video, since it's primarily used in 5th edition, which is probably the most played edition currently.
oh, it's in 3.5 as well.
No,
Um,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it's scaled into, if they keep along the same scaling lines.
Yeah,
pretty similar.
3.5. The challenge rating is 1 to 1. It's 1 to 4 basic. So
Mm.
any like a CR5 monster means a party of a party of 4 at level 5 can deal with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some other stuff in there as well, but that's for another video. And I mean, my personal view on it is that personally like to under challenge the players. I guess I'd say for that first encounter specifically that I may like it's a tutorial. That's the way I view it. For my first encounter, if I could go back and do my first encounter again, I would make sure that it was easy, super, super easy, because as I said before, you don't want people to be trying to figure out how their sheet works and trying to figure out how to deal with a super complicated monster. It's just a pain. The moment, like, I think I used wolves for my first one, and that was a mistake, because wolves have abilities that are complicated, and by complicated I mean complicated for people who are still trying to figure out how to attack. So making sure that, and I mean, it's fine if not everyone agrees with that, but in my view, the first encounter needs to be easy, super, super easy.
I'd say the first encounter the players are meant to overcome in a combat sense, yes. But if your first encounter, like I said before, is interacting with the big bad evil guy, then I think it's okay for the players to get their butts kicked as long as it's in a non-lethal way. Like, big bads don't always just kill people outright, depending on your scenario. If it's like a vampire count or something, they'll mock you with their ability and then leave, and that kind of puts a sour taste in the player's mouth that they want to get back at them.
Ooh, I disagree. I disagree with you on one point there, actually. Sorry, Trent,
Okay.
I'll let you come in too. But specifically, the idea that the first encounter is an auto lose one. This is something I've heard time and time again. The people talk about, the big bad comes in, flexes, shows off how tough he is, and it's fine to do that. Let me be specific here. It is fine to have early on in the campaign for players to get flexed on by a really powerful big evil guy. But the first encounter, that very first level 1 encounter, I completely disagree. because if players are trying to figure out how dice work, if players are trying to figure out what your attack, but what does an attack mean? If you put them into an auto losing counter, you are priming them with a slap in the face right out the door. Oh, somebody's getting called. How embarrassing.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. But so I would save that, at least give them at least a few encounters. What I mean by that is give them the taste of victory before you give them a loss. And to like go further with that, I would say do not make your first encounter an auto lose encounter. That is that is a hard sort of opinion I have.
I mean, what degree of loss are we talking to? I think thematically one of the two of the best examples, because these are pulpy films in and of themselves. Star Wars and the first Indiana Jones movie are perfect examples, I would say. Star Wars, I mean, everybody's seen episode 4 at this point,
Yep.
Hopefully. You have Luke and Han and Chewie and R2 and C-3PO. They've rescued Princess Leia. They're going back to the Millennium Falcon. And Obi-Wan has his show off against Darth Vader. And it establishes how dangerous Vader is as a character and how, it sort of helps establish the strength of the Empire, but the Stormtroopers themselves are always portrayed as being really, really useless. But it sets a thematic base for the characters' reactions. You can employ that in a way. If you're going to have a losing situation, don't make it a 100%.
Okay, I see what you mean.
You have to make it mean something, though. It can't just be like you step on the player's hands for the sake of seeing them squirm. There needs to be underlying information given to them, or underlying plot hooks that are sunk in when they overhear something or they see something and know they have to go do something. It has to move the story. It can't just be a stepping on the players for the sake of stepping on them.
But that's why I was just going to say, that's why I think the Star Wars example is such a good one, because there is a point to it. It's not just and it's not that's the two big things. If you're going to have your players lose an encounter, don't make it a total loss, and have it actually have a point to it.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say is, if you actually think about the Star Wars one, that's not the first encounter. That's nowhere near the first encounter. You have all the stuff of getting the characters together. If you want to look at what's technically the first encounter of the players together, I would argue that's the Millennium Falcon escaping from Tatooine.
Yeah. When he says the first encounter, I think he means in the respect that there's Gandalf that's leading you along. It's the scene where Gandalf dies. It's when the party is truly divided in a sense, because they kind of lose the guide. I think that's more along the lines of what
the Balrog in Lord of the Rings is an amazing example for that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that killing the guide, the guide has to be established first. So what I'm saying is that, specifically, we are talking here about the first session TPK. And to that extent, if your first session TPK is if your first session is not a session of teaching people how to not screw up, and instead it's teaching them that they are weak, I feel like you're basically you're setting a precedence that people are not going to like. If that makes sense.
No, I could see that. I think this is one of those situations where it comes down to knowing the players, especially if they're new to the fantasy roleplay scene. They're coming in with a lot of preconceived notions of grandeur that you could definitely use and feed off of, because they're not familiar with the setting, by having this kind of thing flaunted in their face. But if you have more experienced players, they might see it as more of a I guess that's how it's going to be situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not saying that players can't die in the first thing, because preconceived notions, going straight onto that, players sometimes will walk into these things being exceptionally cocky and not understanding that they can die. Teaching them that the kettle is hot instead of just telling them, that is an inevitable thing you will have to do. They're going to have to get burned to learn that kettle is hot. But I'm just saying, I can't agree with it being the very first thing you do. you have to. What I mean is that you get, if they're coming in with the notion that they are superpowered gods or whatever, having them slaughter a few goblins or whatever is a fantastic way just to teach them the rules and keep morale up. Because like moving on a little bit here is one of the biggest things that you're going to get, and I've seen this directly before, is I'm going to call this seeding. You do this thing I'm going to call seeding fear into the players. And what that is when you kill players. I'll reference a specific game. It was a GOPD game. For those who don't know what GOPD is, I do it on the channel every once in a while. It's a nice freeform, high lethality type game. But if you play smart, there's no real danger if you dying. Well, that's not true. There is some, but rant aside, what happened was they got in. They were doing okay up until somebody screwed up, and then everyone split up and got wiped out. And most of the players would not play again except one. And what I noticed is every time he played after that, he was super cautious. He retreated at the first sign of danger, and it took me a while until I actually asked him. And what he said, it kind of stuck with me, which was that he was really paranoid that the moment bad things started happening, that things would just continue getting worse and worse and worse, and that was the time to pull out. And that wasn't at all what I had intended. And it turns out that I had to explain to him what I meant to do, and that he needed to be a bit more adventurous. And after that, he did have a lot of fun being a bit more adventurous. But it just taught me, it was a really important lesson, because that fear that you could put into people, if you don't immediately address it or anything, it's going to really turn them off your game. And this can cause you to sort of break your session. You might not have a session 2 if everybody is grumpy because all their characters died in session 1. If you guys have anything out there?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I've had a similar situation where one of my players died in my D&D campaign. It wasn't because they messed up or because I overpowered the encounter. It was a situation where the dice just don't agree. And death save after death save, nobody could get to him. He didn't roll good enough, and he ended up dying. And he just kind of had this, well, I guess that's it for that character, kind of mentality. And I felt bad genuinely, because I know he enjoyed that character, but it was pre-established that I wasn't gonna fudge dice for the sake of saving somebody's character, because then you're not really adventuring at all. There's no risk if there's no possibility of death.
Of
But just having the dice betray players can be just as devastating as them or the DM making over or underpowered encounters.
Yeah. Trent?
I was throwing in there, even the first session I ever played with you, I didn't hate that encounter. Yeah, we lost pretty much the entire party, and I lost my knight, but I had a pretty awesome standoff with a bugbear that could have gone either way except for a die roll. And that encounter doesn't stick in my head because I died. It stuck in my head because my character, who I had designed a very specific way, sacrificed himself to keep as much of the rest of the party alive as possible. So it's little victories, little setups. But again, I think what you guys were talking about earlier is it comes down to knowing your players. New players will always react differently, especially if you don't know them in person. That's why you could end up having attrition.
Yeah. So because the most important thing here is that we want to have fun at the end of the day. Losing, the risk of failure does add to the fun. But, and I said it once and I'll say it again. Well, I said it twice probably at this point. Is for someone who is new to the tabletop scene, the TPK is one of the worst ways to enter it. It's not going to be good for them, and it's going to really turn them off it. So setting up in such a way that that there's very little risk of it, in my opinion, might not be the worst idea. This is specifically, though, for people who are new to it. Once you've gotten past this is my first game, I have no idea how to make a character sheet. If it's someone who's come from other games before, other campaigns, you could gun them down with prejudice. That's part of teaching people stuff.
Yeah, but with what Treant was saying was if your character dies in the first session because they're sticking to their guns metaphorically and their morals literally, and the players are if they're having fun and it's a TPK, I think that's not a loss,
No,
even if
you're not wrong.
everybody dies.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
As long as it comes down to at the end of the night, everybody had fun, even if everybody died, then that's still a win
Yeah,
by any measure.
for sure. Um,
Um,
yeah.
I think the TPKs that put people off the most, and that's going back on the exam, are TPKs where they felt they had no influence over how it was going to fall.
Yeah.
If you have what's a great example? DM of the Rings by Sean Young, the web comic. Uh, really funny. The finale, with Lord of the Rings at the end when Frodo goes to throw the ring into Mount Doom, it goes down to a single die roll, and it completely invalidated everything the players had done up to that point.
Mhm.
That's not. I mean, it's purposefully done. That's not how you do it. But if it came down to decisions that the players had or mistakes the players made, but it wasn't a complete loss, there was no chance that it was going to end up that way entirely. That's a difference. That sounds a little bit ranty, but basically, the biggest thing with role-playing games is player agency, and if the players feel that they had no influence over how that TPK happened, or it felt like it was an inevitability, that's going to be a very different situation from it coming down to just a mistake that they made on their part.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I'd say there is, as a DM, don't expect I've said this, and we've said this in other streams before. Don't expect your players to follow what you have carefully planned, or to not be incredibly stupid for their first session. This is one of the reasons why I'm prejudiced against auto lose encounters at the beginning, where you show off the big bad right at the beginning, because dumbass players will keep running into that bad over and over again because they don't because this is their first thing. And if they keep doing that, and then you slaughter them and ask, why didn't you run away or something? That's not very fair. We've talked about this before in other sessions, in other streams, where you need to sort of condition, or you need to teach them like that. Now is the time to run. Now is the time to fight. But at the very beginning, the idea that that you're using your power as a DM to just kind of go in wrath of God on someone because they didn't do the thing the way you wanted them to do it. It's a common mistake, and it's one that you really need to make sure that you don't do.
Yeah, that's why I find with new parties, it's good to have the guide NPC, or some would call the DNPC, the Dungeon Master, non-player character, kind of be the little the Navi to your link that's just like, hey, listen, we're about to get wrecked. We should probably find something to do that would stop it, or get out of here.
Yeah.
I think that's a good tool for beginner DMs to help prevent the TPK when you're not 100% confident in your player's ability to be competent or to read the situation the way you read it.
Yeah. Because they won't read the situation the way you read it almost every time. That is the nature of your players. As they say, no plan survives the first encounter with the players.
Or the enemy, yeah.
Or the enemy. And, I mean, unless anyone has any other thoughts, I kind of want to move into our sort of third part of this.
I mean, I just want to chime in on
Yeah, sure.
DNPCs really quick. That's its own can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they can be used to convey the story, but more often than not, I've seen DMs use a DNPC as an excuse to be a player inside of the game that they're managing, where the DNPC takes precedence over the actions or the abilities of the other players.
Yep. That's definitely a case of with great power comes great responsibility. You can't have Superman show up in a party of level 1 teenagers and be like, okay, this is a fair and balanced team.
Precisely.
It's always better to make them weaker than the players, but have them be sometimes the necessary voice of reason.
Yeah, or just fill a niche. If the players don't want to lug around all their gear, the DMPC is the gear lugging man. But yes, that's an entirely different stream altogether. And to keep this from going too long, the final part I want to talk about is once you've had that TPK, how do you handle it? Because I'm sure there's going to be at least a couple of people who are coming into this with that particular situation. I've killed all my players. How do I handle it? And the first thing and the most important thing I can tell you is do not put on the baby gloves. People will be very tempted if they killed other players the first time. Well, that means that I screwed up, even if it wasn't their fault at all. So they'll start pulling everything back after that, and that's just as bad as what you did to begin with. I could hear you, Albert, chomping at the bit there. What do you got?
I think the one of the most important things to do after you have a TPK, or at least what I would do after having a TPK, is either after the session the same day or after a couple days pass, get the players back together and talk about what they think happened and how they saw it unfold, and what their thoughts are. Because at the end of the day, the DM is the puppet master, directing the show to the players, and if the players aren't watching the movie the same way you're watching the movie, then there's a miscommunication that should be addressed.
Yep.
Especially when it comes to a total player kill. Like, DMs will run themselves through the ring, just tearing their hair out. What went wrong? Was there one too many goblins? No, it was the players' fault because the players didn't listen to the shopkeeper from 2 towns ago, or what have you. And I think at the end, regardless of what you come up to on your own, you should definitely chime in with your players and see how they perceived the situation and scenario.
Yep. I completely agree. We've talked about this before, and this is always, like, no matter what the question is, this is always part of the answer, is be honest and talk with your players. You can't, if you don't communicate with your players, then you're never going to find a solution. If you can't find common ground together, what are you even doing? Trent, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, that just comes down to, if you're playing role-playing games, even with people who might not be close friends, everybody sitting at a table is an adult, or hopefully can act like one. Discussing what went wrong, or even if you had a session where everything went off perfectly, that's the time for a player to be critical of their DM, and I'm talking constructive criticism, not,
Not
deconstructive criticism.
Yeah,
Where you're just putting them down.
Yeah, for lack of a better word. And this is because I'm incredibly self-critical, especially when I run games. I love sitting my players down after the fact and asking them what they thought of it. And the thing that I hate most is when everybody tells me they enjoyed the session and they can't wait to have another one, and then when I try to organize the next week, nobody shows up.
Yep.
Like, don't tell your DM that you had a good time if you hated it.
Or if you have that be the first of 2 parts or 3 parts or 4 parts of your critique or situation, because you can say you enjoyed it, but then don't just stop there. Like, don't give it like a 5-star 2-word Amazon review on how you enjoyed it, but you should be specific and what you enjoyed, what you thought was interesting, what you didn't expect, or what you could see coming clearly. Like, you need to give that kind of feedback to your DM, because they need to know what you like so they can make more of it.
Precisely. I've said this before, and it's if you give someone a 1-star review, you usually give your reasoning why. In the same way, if you give someone a 5-star review, you got to give your reasoning why. If you're saying, "Oh, this was terrible," and then you go through this reason, then in the same way, if this is great, you give this reason, this reason, this reason. This is more. I mean, I think this is more framed for the players, like this specific part. But I definitely think it's like, as a DM, make sure that you push the players to do it. Go after players that just give you the 2-word. It's good.
Yeah.
DMing is a lot of work, but it's really rewarding for the people who enjoy it. And there's always going to be more players than there are game masters. And the worst thing you can do is either tell your DM that you hated it and not offer any suggestions to fix it, or say you enjoyed it and then not show up. Most of my games that have fallen apart because my players did not show up the next week, even though they told me they enjoyed it. And that's really disheartening, and it's very, very hard to get back on the proverbial wagon when that happens.
Yep. So I think that's the entire thing covered. Anyone else got anything they want to add here?
I'm just gonna throw in a little tip that I do sometimes. After I have a lengthier session with my players, um, or when it's a session with a lot of plot development or personal character development, or even if we're going to be going on like a short hiatus, like we're going to miss 1 or 2 sessions, I like to throw out, like, I make a little questionnaire. It's like, how have you enjoyed the campaign up until this point? And I just kind of send it around. I'll send it to with a player that I probably have the most faith and trust in to fill his opinion out, and then send it to the other players, but leave it so the names, so I don't like, so it's anonymous within the confines of a 5-man party. Just so, but as a DM, you could probably read it and tell who wrote what once you get to know your players. But I find it's a useful tool for letting them feel like they can vent without the threat of being ostracized by the DM or of um, being like personally targeted when they have the guise of anonymous critique and review. So I find personally that's a good tool that I use.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely. I don't think every DM could do it. I don't think I could personally do that. But I mean, that seems like the most essentially good way to kind of get the direct feedback you need. So, with that in mind, I think we're gonna call it here.
If I could just offer one quick final.
Yep, go ahead.
This is something I actually wanted to say at the beginning. Some of the best advice I've ever seen for new DMs, especially from the websites that I frequent. If there is an introductory quick play module, run the module. It'll teach you and the players the rules, and they're balanced for new players. It's a lot easier to have a game go off without a hitch if you're using something that someone else has made than trying to make your own thing with no experience.
Yeah, that's a good one. Owlbear, any other last thoughts?
I think we've covered everything pretty substantially.
Okay. So I'd like to thank everyone who came here, and thank you to my two co-hosts, Owlbear and Treant. This has been another episode of Hydra's Den. I hope you all got some good information out of it. We love to see new DMs running games and bringing people together. So, if you have any questions, you can put this in the comments. This is going up on YouTube. Or you can put it in our Discord. We do most of our managing for this through the Discord. We do constant AMAs. We do all sorts of other stuff. We do little games and everything too. The link to the Discord should be in the description on this video. Once again, I've been your host, Hydra, and I hope you all have a fantastic night.